good afternoon. Welcome to the weekly livestock market update. I'm Brownfield Anchor reporter Meghan Grebner with us as always to talk all things markets. University of Missouri, Scott Brown. Good afternoon, Scott.
Good afternoon, Megan.
I am going to say that the summer grilling season is well underway, and it's been an interesting week as it relates to the markets, and we'll get into all of that. We're going to talk some monthly trade data. We're going to talk some supply and demand. But to kick things off, let's recap the wild week in both cattle and hog markets.
Yeah, we certainly have seen plenty of volatility. On the cattle side, it's actually been a good week, Megan. You look at those live-fed cattle prices, they were $7.70 higher this week. That just puts them $48.50 above where they were a year ago at this time. Feeder cattle markets were also strong this week, $10 to $15 higher on the week. The August live cattle futures contract was actually down $1.20, and the August feeder cattle contract closed down nearly $2.70. We did gain $17.30 on the choice box beef price this week. That was on strength in all of the components and puts that choice beef box beef price $53 above where it was a year ago at this time. On the hog side, positive news in terms of cash barrels and gilts this week, $2.40 higher this week. The July lean hog futures contract was up $5.40 on the week, and the pork cutout value gained right at $2 this week. Stronger hams and bellies kind of led the way there.
When we look at what's going on in the cash hog market specifically, are we surprised to see just how large runs have been? And we'll talk a little bit about that as well, but also the big jumps that we would see day to day and what's been happening there.
Yeah, so those big changes day to day have been somewhat surprising. I think it's a market that continues to search for its identity. Maybe was too low for a period of time, and some of the bounce back we've seen of late is getting it back in better place. Again, I think a lot of uncertainty in the market about where demand goes for the remainder of this year. Hams and bellies both have been what's been important to that market in particular, and getting some higher belly prices this week maybe has been helpful to just kind of the attitude of where we sit in that market.
When we talk about that demand uncertainty and volatility that relates to it, I think of a couple of different things. One, Proposition 12, how that all plays out as that suspension lifts, July 1st, correct? And then looking at global demand, global economies, but also Mexico is such a large trading partner with us. Are we watching what happens with this whole GMO corn deal now that the USTR has taken next steps, and how that could potentially impact trade overall with one of our largest trading partners?
You certainly highlight the two big issues that I think lay out there for demand uncertainty. So yes, Prop 12 could have some big implications. I think everyone's still trying to figure out exactly what the requirements are going to be once we start talking about product needing to meet those regulations in January of 24, or in terms of what third parties are going to need to verify. So I think there's a lot of uncertainty there that's been troubling the markets. I suppose on the Mexico side of the ledger, if they decide they don't need U.S. hams, I think that could be a little difficult for ham prices in general. And as we work on GMO corn, that certainly could be one of the outcomes, I suppose.
Plenty for us to talk about for the rest of 2023 as we prep for 2024 marketing year.
Yeah, gone are the days of just knowing where supplies are to figure out where prices are going to be. Now it's just a whole bunch of different issues, as much demand related as supply related, that ends up driving us at the end of the day.
Let's take a look at the slaughter numbers for the week. Obviously, holiday shortened week last week, which is going to impact those numbers a little bit. But how did things shape up?
Yeah, so USDA tells us for the week ending June 10th, a run of 621,000 cattle this week. That's up 48,000 from last week's shortened slaughter run, but 50,000 head below where we were a year ago. Hog run this week, 2.363 million head. That's also up 335,000 head, but down 3,000 head from where we were last year.
As we take a look year over year, how has that changed for both cattle and hogs?
Yes, we continue to see cattle weaker relative to last year. So we're down 3.5% in terms of year-to-date slaughter. On the pork side, we see some increase up 1.3% year-to-date on hog slaughter relative to a year ago.
Monthly trade data was out this week. Scott, as we transition and talk a little bit about where our product is going and how the demand picture is shaping out, run through these April numbers.
Yeah, so I'll start on the more positive side of this equation. Pork exports in April, 581 million pounds of pork left the United States. That was up relative to April of 2022, where we had an up about 52 million pounds relative to April of 2022. When you look at year to date, we're up 8.7% in terms of U.S. pork exports. So we're getting some strength happening there. When you look at where that's coming, it's really across the board. So Mexico, China, South Korea, but then a bunch of other countries matter as well. So that bunch of other countries that I reference up 76 million pounds year to date. Maybe that's a part of what the pork industry needs, of a lot of other countries being willing to take a little bit of pork from us. When you look at the beef side, a little different story coming there. 268 million pounds of beef in April of 23 was exported, down 36 million pounds relative to a year ago. When you look at year-to-date numbers, 1.15 billion pounds of beef's left the United States. Unfortunately, that's down about 9% relative to where we were a year ago. When you look at where we're getting losses there, China, South Korea has kind of leading that lower pork export side for us.
When we look at China has been such a big picture, obviously for the pork side of things, then kind of coming into the beef, and now part of the beef story as well, but maybe not as great of a story to tell there. How, when we look at the diversification of markets, where is that like bright spot for pork? You mentioned like there's just a whole bunch of really great in diversified markets. Where's our next big, maybe it's not China, maybe it's just a solid trading partner that they're working on developing that relationship.
So I think it's hard to identify. When I say that, hard to identify, I think it's hard to find the next China, if you will. Sometimes we talk about India being one that's growing. I'm not certain that generates a lot of additional pork trade for us anytime soon, but I think this does come down to, it's going to be a number of countries that are solid trading partners. It's not just going to be one. And as much as you and I talk about price risk mitigation for producers, to me, this is risk mitigation on the trade front that's important as well. When I have that whole handful of countries interested in my product, if one of them chooses to not take product from me, it's not a wreck like we've seen with China and soybeans in particular, but hogs as well at times.
Does that also maybe highlight the importance of these free trade agreements, making sure that these are negotiated? I think about Japan and how big it was on the beef trade side of things to get that tariff situation worked through. Does that play a role in that whole big trade picture for both beef and pork?
For sure it does. So we've seen a number of countries where we've had tariffs that have worked down that have been important to our growth in terms of meat exports. I think that is a constant area of focus that we need to have. At the same time, I'll say just building these new markets, it's costly in terms of getting anything launched. So as we think about this upcoming farm bill, The ability to have funding available for that kind of market development, I think, is going to continue to be important as both the beef and pork industries look to grow global trade.
And we talk about research in the Farm Bill, funding for research, funding obviously for crop insurance and risk management tools like that. But this is, you bring up a really good point, that this is an area that farmers should be passionate about protecting funding for as well.
So I think the issue here is it's not so instant, right? So it's important, yet it's not like getting $1 of payments, direct payments for something that a producer's doing. They don't see that quite so directly in their bottom line. Yet I go, it's probably more important than that $1 of direct payments that they might be getting at times. You're trying to grow long-term demand, and I sound like a broken record when I say growth in consumption of meat products in front of us probably occurs outside the United States, not within it. Just emphasizes how important our work is in terms of market development in the rest of the world.
Got supply and demand numbers out today. As we take a look at that, what did you pull out as it relates to beef and pork?
Well, so USDA's underestimated cattle prices in 2023, like everybody else in the world, and they're trying to catch up. And I don't mean to be critical of them, but they now have raised the Fed steer price another $5.20 this month relative to where they were in May. And we're almost halfway through the year at this point, Megan. So it just tells you how much strength there is. And not only did they raise 2023, but their 2024 estimate went up $8 a hundred to now set at $180. So we're chasing those prices higher. So maybe this is a good time to remind us that we will come out the other side of that at some point, and the crash could be just as quick and swift as the upswing has been. So let's make sure we don't not price protect ourselves at times. Otherwise, not a lot of big change. Actually raised beef production in 2023 by 165 million pounds, now down 4.2%. So we've actually been getting higher prices with less of a supply cut than USDA would have originally been projecting. Otherwise, not a lot of change, and we didn't get much on the feed side of this equation. USDA didn't adjust yields of corn and soybeans at this point in time. They've rarely done any of those kinds of changes, but come July, August, we'll see what dry weather might do to some in some parts of the country to corn and soybean yields.
Gosh, you bring up weather, and I spoke with Matt Meghan this week, and taking a look at how the El Nino has come in and what this means. And it's not a fantastic, it is not a fantastic outlook for parts of the country, and specifically some of those big corn and soybean parts of the country.
For sure. And I always say, I think we have two things going on. So number one, and Missouri certainly now been in a pretty dry situation. The governor activating the drought task force here in Missouri this week just reminds me of how it's dry in some places. It's going to be hard to get hay and pasture to come back for those areas that are already dry. We're well into that growing season. We just probably don't recover very much. Corn, just tell me how much rain we get here in the next 3 or 4 weeks, and we could have a really good corn crop, or it could get really tough. So a lot of uncertainty on that front. Let's hope we get some good rains. I say that from a livestock perspective, but weather's going to play a big piece of the puzzle here, I think, for the next 60 or 90 days.
Timeliness is going to matter. I mean, because it may not be a lot, and if you're going to take what you get, it's got to come at the right times, right?
Exactly. So it all depends on when those crops went in the ground, when they're going to need that last drink to make sure they get over the hump. And we could still have really good corn yields yet, but it all depends on what kind of rainfall we get in those I states over the next 60 days or so.
Too bad both of our crystal balls are extremely cracked and there's no clear view of what's going to happen in the future.
I think my crystal ball broke in half and it's laying in two pieces now, Megan. It's not just cracked.
Scott, it is always great to see you. We're going to turn our attention to the domestic demand side of things next week. As you're looking ahead to retail prices and consumer sentiment, what are you watching?
Yeah, just always seeing any kind of demand positives here as we look in. I should be careful about sounding too negative when I say that, but hopefully the second half of 2023 looks better. I mean, that's kind of been the story that we've been focused on, that the first half might be tough, but it gets better as we go. We see some signs of that. What kind of strength are we getting because of the fact we're in the middle of grilling season? I think all those things are going to be interesting out of the reports next week.
I always think it's interesting thinking about prices at the grocery store during the summer grilling season and just kind of how things play out, whether it's what's discounted, what's on sale, what's bringing you into the grocery store, and how that impacts the demand overall.
It is an amazing period, and it's interesting. So I think our point of comparison being 21 and 22, that 2021 and 2022 that were just so strong, and although we're talking about demand not as strong here in 2023, just to recognize that kind of puts us back to where we were pre-COVID. Just reminds us of how strong 2021 and 2022 were. The question I think still on the minds of many is, are we going back to those kind of pre-COVID demand levels, or is it going to look more like what we've seen the last couple of years? I don't think we know the complete answer to that question yet.
Scott, we will find out maybe some of those answers next week.
That sounds great, Megan.
We'll see you then. To have our weekly livestock market update delivered to your email box, go to brownfieldagnews.com. It's delivered on Saturday mornings. You can also ask questions and submit comments there. And for a daily rundown of what happens in the commodity markets, make sure to check out John Perkins' Market Minute. Have a great weekend. I'm Meghan Grebner from Brownfield.